Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Please be sure to download the app and share it with your friends. You'll have access to all of our station's content, not just the front line with Joe and Joe. And if you like what Joe and I do, we go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern Time across social media. So X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube. We're growing nicely thanks to you. We'd like to continue to do so. So please, where you see our conversations, like, subscribe. Most importantly, share this video because Veritas is gracious enough to let us use the interviews we do for the radio and post them on our social media. So if you like these conversations, the people that we have, the topics that we're discussing, please help us out. Now, today, Joe and I always talk about, there are things that everything we talk about, we like to think brings us into the breach. Okay. And sometimes you're going a little bit further in the breach. And when you're talking about postmodernism, we talking about the current predicament in the world. Okay. That's really going into the breach because there's causes of that, and there are causes that some people find uncomfortable. Well, that's why Bobby Angel's here, because he's written a new book, The Postmodern Predicament, and a roadmap for recovery and restoration. There is recovery and restoration. We just have to find the path, and Bobby's going to tell us all about that. Now, the book is available at Sophia Press, I'm sure, amongst other places, but I will post a link in the description, and if you click on that link, because Joe and Joe, you'll get a 15% discount, and that's always a beautiful thing. So please go out and buy the book, once again, The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. Now, Bobby's well known. Having said that, for those of you who are not familiar, Bobby Angel is an author, speaker, and personal mentor trained by the Catholic Psych Institute. He taught theology and philosophy while serving as a high school minister for almost a decade. Bobby and his wife Jackie present regularly on the topics of Christian marriage and discernment, and minister through podcasts and media on YouTube. Bobby has authored Gaming and the Heroic Life and co-authored Pray, Decide, and Don't Worry alongside his wife and Father Mike Schmitz. Bobby and Jackie live in Dallas, Texas with their 5 children. Bobby Angel, welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe, brother.
Thank you guys so much for having me here.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. And like I said, this is going to be a great conversation. More importantly, this is an important conversation. I don't know if people understand history and the movements of history and different zeitgeist, if you will. Well, we happen to be living in a postmodern world, and that's exactly what we're going to get into. Joe Resinello, I'll throw it over to you.
Bobby, we always begin with prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, as Joe said, this is a very good conversation. Clearly, we all have different types of friends. I could just speak for myself. Saints and sinners alike. All types of friends, all types of people. And frankly, people don't ask the big questions anymore. Why do we suffer? What's the purpose of our life? What are you doing? What's the objective of your marriage? We can go on and on and on. People simply don't live in those type of questions. They live on the surface of life as if they're going to live forever. And this is basically what we're going to try to talk about today. But before we get into some of those big questions, and we are going to tackle them, why do you think that is, Bobby? Because let's be honest. We all die. I mean, I think about this from just a practical perspective. No matter who you are, you could be Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan. You are sitting on the top of the hill. Well, he's in his 70s. Jamie Dimon dies. What do you think about when you're Jamie Dimon, when you're approaching the end of your life? Basically, what is there? I'll be truthful with you. It would scare me, and I'm not Jamie Dimon, and I'm thinking about that question. But why doesn't society think about these big questions, and what are some of the other ones?
I think it's a human avoidance of the frame of death, of the death being this door, this period, this we all know it's coming, but we all want to deny it. We fight from it. I think it's a very old, just human condition situation. And we do live in such comfortable times where people aren't dying from disease on the street wherever we go. Like, it's not like, just what life expectancy has become, the modern American standard of living being something beyond what most generations of the world could imagine. It's really easy to push death and discomfort out of view. And because it does shake those questions of what's my life about and what's after this. And to we think by avoidance somehow I'm going to conquer it. And maybe if I'm just even surround myself with wealth and distractions up to the last minute, I won't have to. But this is the stuff of philosophy. It really is, where philosophy and theology meet of what is the point of life and what does a good life even entail? What does that mean? Like, well, now you're asking the philosophical questions, and we of faith would say it's not a period, it's more of a dot dot dot. It's a door we all are going to have to pass through and reckon with how have I lived my life? Because yeah, it's like the most important questions are the ones people usually try to avoid asking.
One of the things, Bobby Angel, and if you're just joining us here, Bobby Angel's written a new book, The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. Click the link in the description, and it'll take you right to the website. You can buy the book with a discount, and please support our Catholic publishers along with our Catholic authors like Bobby. But here's my thing, Bobby, and I talk about this a lot on the show, okay? But one of the things we're dealing with, see, it's one thing to have a different philosophical point of view, okay? We could go back over history. We could talk about the Enlightenment. We could talk about German idealism. We could talk about all the different philosophies over time. But we live in a world now. Let's be clear. 20 years ago, you got Dawkins and Dennett and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens telling you philosophy's irrelevant. We don't need philosophy. We don't need metaphysics. We have physics. We don't need metaphysics. That's a lot of BS, part of my language, out there at the front line with Joe and Joe at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. But I want your thoughts on that because, see, it's not only like you have, let's say, two people debating, all right, and they have a different worldview. They think differently about the big questions that Joe was alluding to. Now we're being told, especially the younger generation, particularly in the universities, philosophy is irrelevant. We don't have to think about the big questions because we know how atoms work and we could look through a telescope. Tear that apart, Bobby, would you please?
Well, even that is a philosophical stance to say that we don't need to ask those questions anymore. Well, you're doing philosophy. And so Harris and Dawkins and these others who kind of they went big and they've also kind of fizzled out in terms of like their popularity and the lastingness of their arguments because again it's this either just kind of nihilistic materialism that we know in our heart of hearts there's something more. There's something more, like we're more than just mere atoms. We're more than just mere animalistic creatures, higher evolved apes who either have to just kind of go hedonistic and eat, drink, and be merry till we die, or just give into despair now. And, there's the euthanasia movement that when it gets too much, just off yourself. It's like, here's where the two roads diverge. And I think for most people, it's like, there's something else. There's got to be a third way. There's got to be a way of meaning and purpose because, as C.S. Lewis would say, why would I be born with these desires if there's nothing to satisfy them? So we are meaning-making creatures. And I used to teach, and one of my go-to graduation gifts for the seniors, I would give them Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Great book.
Because it was these Catholic graduating seniors would kind of be thrown off by me giving them this book of an Austrian Jewish Holocaust survivor. But it's because it's like, listen, I know you need to ask questions. Like you need to ask questions about your faith. You need to go off into the college landscape or wherever you're going and be tested. And to see too that, look, like hard times are going to come. And it doesn't mean your faith is bupkis. It means you decide how you choose to engage in those circumstances. I may not get to choose the situation, but I can choose my attitude towards it. And that's what Frankl noted, who survived the Holocaust. He survived the Auschwitz camp and went back to his practice. His wife passed away from the horrors of World War II, but he somehow pieced his life back together and maintained his humor as well. You'd think he would be a very dreary fellow, but he also saw, listen, we need meaning. We need purpose. I saw in the death camps, the people that gave up hope, the people that gave up any semblance of life is worth living were the first to go. The guys that were started smoking the cigarettes that they were hiding, if they started eating the piece of bread that they were just kind of rationing away. It's like we need purpose and meaning. And whether you're religious or not, like that is what's needed, some kind of telos, some kind of direction of for my life. And the purely materialistic, the pure like we don't need to ask questions anymore. We know everything. Like that hubris, it doesn't satisfy. Maybe it sounds good. You spit it back for the test, but it doesn't leave the human heart or the human mind at ease.
I want to
No,
talk about that book for a second. I know we're talking about your book because that's a huge book, and there's another incident in that book that always stuck with me. The first one you mentioned, we have to have a purpose for our life. That is a driving principle from that book. I always remember it because I also read it. The second one, which I always remember, is when he's in the camp and a scientist or someone who is very accomplished, like he was, approaches him and he's hoarding like his research report. And Frankel says to him, who's been in the camp for some time, in here, that means nothing. It's grass. You see, that's what successful people can't understand because they focus on their own achievements. We all have friends like that. I mean, I'm sure you do. I know Joe does, and I do. They focus their whole life on that. But when it comes down to it, it means nothing because we all get sick. We've all, we're all middle aged. I have 5 kids. I've lost my father. I've seen my grandmother died. I watched my father die of Parkinson's disease, who was a very healthy man, athletic man until he was 75. And then from 75 to 84, I watched him disintegrate in front of my face. We die. And that research report that we're holding on to means nothing at that point. Nothing. Nothing. Zero. Man misses that. We go through our whole life lying to ourselves, and we all face that point of life. Talk about that because that is a big question. And to your point, we just put that off. We think, oh, that's not going to be me. That's not going to happen to me. Wrong. Wrong.
Well, we're all idol-making machines, the human heart is. So whether that is wealth or popularity, status, relationships, lust, we all put our worth into that. Like, I'll be happy when I have that thing. And nothing this side of heaven can satisfy that. And now the problem with the postmodern time we're living in, which the postmodernism, it's really this dismantling of all meaningful narratives. So there is no great story that we're embroiled in. There's no great narrative to our country anymore or our purpose. It's just kind of whatever you want to make of it. It's your story. It's your truth. And that sounds intoxicating from a rebellious teenage kind of attraction of like, yeah, I can do whatever I want. I can make my own meaning, male and female, even I can decide what that is. But how heavy is that? How crushing is that? You've got to make up your own values. You've got to make up your own meaning of what does it mean to live a good life. And so, and we wonder why this generation, mine and younger, Gen Z especially, is just crippled with anxiety. It's because we've given them no direction. You've given them the loaded gun of a cell phone, and even they're the ennui of, well, I can Google anything. Why do I need to learn anything? Why do I, like, if the world's all been discovered through Google Earth, like, what's the point of adventure? What's the point of travel? It's like, it used to be the car keys were the symbol of freedom. The kids couldn't wait to get a driver's license, but now it's the phone. Why would I ever leave the house? And I mean, I when I worked at the high school, I saw parents of senior students begging their students to get their driver license. Like, can you please learn how to drive? I'm tired of shuttling you around everywhere. But that kind of cocoon of safety, which we saw explode in COVID, the people that like, I want safety over freedom. And so this sense of, am I in a meaningful narrative? Am I in a meaningful, purpose-driven life or not? And if so, I can face these things. And even if it means the loss of, my health, the loss of my wealth, the loss of the securities, because there is something more important. But if we've lost that, then those things, as you said, the scientist clutching his research paper, like that's the most important thing. but it's like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, like who's just obsessed with the ring, but it's not making you free. It's actually enslaving you.
Well, Bobby, I was going to actually wait for a little bit to get on that, but being that you brought it up, and if you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe, Bobby Angel's joining us. He's got a new book out from Sophia Press, The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. Now, click the link in the description. It'll take you right to the website. You can purchase the book with a discount because you know Frontline with Joe and Joe. So let's stay on freedom. It's a big theme here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Part of, now, Bobby, please correct me if I'm wrong. All right. Part of the post modern worldview is this, well, it's a perversion of a lot of things, one of which is what is the true meaning of freedom. And I think in America in particular, it's been perverted. So freedom, I think you know where I'm going, but freedom becomes license, or license becomes freedom, and it's never been that way. To be free has a meaning, and it's much deeper than just I can do whatever I want, I could be whatever I want. Talk about that, because I'll just finish with this and I'll throw it over to you. The paradox is that if you like Gollum, okay, if you focus on just the material, or just and make yourself into a god, as Nietzsche said, if you kill God, then you have to be God. So you're your own God. You can do whatever you want. If you do that, you are a slave. And if you are a slave to Jesus Christ, you are totally free. And that's a paradox, but it's the truth. Now, one, do you agree with me? Number two, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I was in the seminary for a couple of years discerning the priesthood before I ultimately felt the call to marriage. And there I was really gifted with this beautiful vision of the Catholic understanding of the story of philosophy. And I had a priest professor who was very kind to Nietzsche. Like you can either see him as this edgy atheist, like on a t-shirt, um, but this priest was saying he's more of a tragic John the Baptist kind of character in that he's not celebrating per se that God is dead because he writes after we have killed him. And what if you were actually to live with those consequences where good and evil become arbitrary? And he descended into madness, Nietzsche did, because it wasn't just, again, this kind of edgy, I'm going to kind of live nihilistic, but not really, because who could really live that way? He went to the end of that life. He went to the end of that journey and lost his mind. So for him, it was less of he was reading the signs of the times. Like we are living like practical atheists. Like maybe we tip our hat to the notion of a God and a divine mover and father of these first principles, but our endless progress and look at us, look at all we've achieved. Clearly we're headed towards utopia and the freedom to just do whatever I want. And Nietzsche's like, this is a terrible burden that we have put ourselves on. And his philosophies get kind of twisted and contorted and picked up by Nazism and Mussolini and all these others. But John Paul II would say freedom exists to serve the good. Because freedom, for the sake of freedom, just leads you to this wide open field, 360 degrees, and gives you no mooring, no direction. So it's great, but then you're like, what do I do with it? Because I can easily shoot myself in the foot or live a very egotistical life. But freedom exists for the sake of love. Freedom exists for me to lay my life down in that, as you said, in that paradox of I get my life back. The more I pour out, the more I can receive from the Lord, the more it's this dance. And it's not this zero-sum game. Because sometimes I think we've, again, inherited the world through this modern or postmodern lens that just sees it as take what you can.
Hmm.
And it's all about me. We're living in the selfie age, in the age of it's all about the subjective person. I want to be on camera at all times. And the Christian paradox is lay your life down, and that's where you're going to find yourself.
And I'm glad you went through that, because I think that's one of the biggest things that we're contending with, particularly as Americans, is we again, I mean, and you hear it. I mean, Joe and I are politically conservative. We lean to the right, okay? But I'm not, people. Let me put it like this to you, Bobby, and I'm going to throw it over to Joe. Just because you're not out in the desert making a golden calf doesn't mean you're not making idols. And we've made idols out of so many things. In America, it's I'm free. I'm free. Okay, but then when you challenge somebody and you say, okay, but what does that mean? Are you free to have an abortion? Are you free to contracept? I mean, are you free? Are you totally like you could just do it? It's just between you. It's between you, God, and your own conscience. That's one of the problems of postmodernism. And you know there is. I think you could correct me if I'm wrong. I see it's to me it's like a Christian postmodernism. Like there, it's postmodernism with a Christian flavor to it. And to me, it's just as dangerous because again, it's the perversion of the original notion and we're going to get into the good, the true, and the beautiful in a little while. Now, I want to be free to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. To me, that's what freedom is. That means making right choices. All right, according to the teachings of Christ and His church. Pretty simple, you know. But again, that's why we have Bobby Angel here because he's breaking it down, and he wrote the book. We're just going to scratch the surface at the front line with Joe and Joe, but the book, which is available at Sophia Press, please go out and buy it. Joe Rossinello.
I want to talk about relativism because I think it's an issue. It's an issue even in the pews of our Catholic Church. You talk to people and they have different opinions on things that are absolutely against what the church teaches, like say same-sex marriage. You could talk to a Catholic and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that." Well, the church isn't. And they could tell you why. If you research it, I could tell you why too, but that's not the purpose of this show. The church is clearly against that. Um, Benedict the 16th wrote a lot about that, and this stems to the original sin, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God says you could do anything you want, but in this garden, I determine what's right and wrong. That's the sin. It's not the apple. It's God is telling man and woman, I determine what's right and wrong. And what is that? It's authority. We don't recognize God's authority. When he has all the cards, getting back to, you're going to die. Jamie Dimon, powerful guy, New York guy, rich as the day is long. You're going to die, guy. You're going to die. You have no authority. You have no leverage whatsoever. But we think we do. So we dictate to God. Talk about the sin of relativism, because at the root of all sins, it's the lack of recognizing the authority of God.
Well, it ties back to the lack of a unifying vision. It's just every man for himself. And so, yeah, Benedict the 16th talked about the dictatorship of relativism. It seems like we all just get to be left alone and to our own opinion, and there'll be some kind of free harmony. But what's the values that are uniting us? It's just lessening year by year the amount of pride in Western civilization, the pride in one's countries, whether it's Great Britain, whether it's America. It's like what unifies us as Americans? It's just rapidly diminishing because we can kind of just stay in this, well, what's important to me? And in the book, I talk about tribalism as the new telos, the new purpose or direction, because if we've lost the vision of what is good and what does a good life entail, then it's every man for himself, but we're not meant to live totally alone. So eventually we've got to find a tribe. So we've got to find the people that think like us, and social media lends itself to kind of finding those silos of groupthink. And we can easily stay in our echo chambers, and then instead of loving our neighbor, instead of loving even our enemies and those that think differently, we just can stay on other sides of the lines. And so the relativistic subjectivism that is really kind of caked into the postmodern soup. Again, it's kind of this intoxicating, you shall be as gods. You can decide what's good for you, what's your truth. Shoot, you can decide what male and female are, but it butts up against the other. It butts up against the other person who is in my neighborhood, in my house, in my work. And so very quickly it's like, well, take the example of work. Well, we've got to have some kind of coherent ethos. We've got to have some coherent how to behave. So you've got the HR departments that try to create some kind of rules or standards that often lean in the postmodern nebulous way that puts Christians who are trying to live the faith in a really precarious position. And now suddenly it's like to live my faith, it's at risk of losing my job, my status. I'm going to be treated differently. So it's not that relativism just leaves everyone alone. It doesn't. At some point, it really starts to take on an authoritative philosophy, whether we want to call it that or not.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, because see, that's one of those things where we need to call people out. You're a relativist. Well, then my view counts equally to yours. You cannot discriminate against me even one bit. Just quick anecdote, Bobby, before we go to a break, okay? My wife and I, a few years ago, we decided we were going to adopt. Okay, the church teaches against IVF. We listened to the church. We started to adopt. We went to the state of New Jersey because I'm in Arizona now, but I was in New Jersey. It's a perfect example of what you're talking about. You walk in for the training to become a foster parent, okay? And right on the wall, you got the Human Rights Campaign flag and you got the rainbow flag. And it was, I've told this on the show and I mentioned it to Joe a million times. It was constant intimidation for the whole program. I mean, outright discrimination and intimidation to the point where the person that was running this, whatever you want, training program from the state of New Jersey said, if you have antiquated views of sexuality, meaning Catholic, okay, specifically Catholic, okay, then you probably want to think of becoming a foster parent. That's what you're dealing with. So, yes, you're right. At some point, they want to make it sound real good. All right, everybody's ideas mean something. Everybody's ideas are equal. There's no truth. There's no false until they get power. And then when they get power, they want to make sure that their worldview trumps your worldview. Okay. And I've seen it firsthand. If my wife wasn't digging her nails into my arm, telling me, Joey, I want our child. All right, please don't open your mouth because I know you're Italian and you're about to explode on this guy. But that's a perfect example, a practical example of what Christians and Catholics in particular, or any person who believes in objective morality, has to go through at the hands of, let's say, the dictators, all right, in the more morally relativistic world. I just wanted to tell that story because this is not like we just think these things are going to happen. And you're in education, Bobby, so you've seen it there too. It's rampant in the education system, all right? All the state agencies, right? Their view trumps yours. That's my rant. I'm sticking to it. Bobby, real quick, we're going to go to a break, but where are you on social media? Do you have a website, any place where people can find out more about you, not just this book, but everything you have going on?
My wife and I have a traveling speaking media ministry, and it's jackieandbobby.com. Also on Instagram, bobby.angel. You can find me and reach out.
All right, cool. Now, please, everybody out there, we're going to come back with another great segment with Bobby Angel. But he's written a new book, The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. Click the link in the description because we not only want to support Bobby and all of our Catholic authors, we want to support our Catholic publishers. So if you click the link in the description to Sophia Press, you'll go to the website, you search for the book, and you'll get a 15% discount because you know Joe and Joe. So, like I said, stick around. This is an important conversation. We have another great segment with Bobby Angel. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, Way in the Breach with Bobby Angel. He's written a new book, The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. We could talk for hours, so I'm just going to shut up and throw it over to Joe Rossinello because we only have about 28 and a half minutes.
Let's talk solutions. We talked about some problems on the other side of the break. We'll talk solutions. You have people in the Catholic Church who want to go back to like medieval times. I've heard that in Catholic circles. They want a Catholic monarchy. I mean, there's tons of shows, and I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just stating what's out there. You have
He's
those
talking
folks.
about me, Bobby. He's talking about me.
No, but there's a lot of other folks, and there's also people who say like Vatican II. We got to get past that. We can go on and on and on and on. There's that crew. Then you got the worldly crew, the secular crew. They want to go back to the times of the Enlightenment, focus in on man. Those are our solutions. We're going to create a utopia. Many of those people are sincere too. Let me just put it out there. I'm not going to judge them. God's going to judge them. I disagree with them, but some of them are sincere. Like I'll just use an example, and I disagree with his solution. Bernie Sanders, what's it called? Sanders, the senator from
Socialist
Vermont.
from Vermont.
He diagnoses a lot of the problems correctly in America. I could sit there at a table with him and be like, yeah, dude, you're spot on. We just disagree with the solution. And to a degree, I think he's actually sincere. To a degree. We just disagree with the solution. So I'm not questioning your heart. What I'm questioning is the solution. We have conflicting views. What is the solution, Bobby?
Yeah, no, it's true. There's a lot of people that I think we agree more often than we tend to think, more than the internet lets us think we see in common. But it goes back to anthropology. Like, what is the human person? Are we meant to live on bread alone? Is it just create the right economic system, the right social conditions, and then we'll have the promised land? Jesus would say no. And in fact, Solzhenitsyn, who survived the Soviet gulags and was a communist supporter who was then on the wrong side of the government and eventually lived through the labor camps and fled to the West. Actually, he was kicked out of Russia essentially for
He was in
exposing.
Vermont. He wasn't with Bernie, but I think they threw him in Vermont too. He came to the U.S. Didn't
Yeah,
Solzhenitsyn live there? I believe he did.
yeah. But he talked about like the problem cuts through the human heart. It's not just create the right economic system. There's a silver bullet, and if we just get it right, if we just get the right policies, the right leader, he's like, no, no, no. Like I used to think that way. The problem lies in the human heart. It's a sin problem. And so there is no real silver bullet, which is why in the book I have the subtitle A Roadmap, not the Roadmap. And a lot of it is kind of commonsensical in that, um, one of the fastest ways I would get the attention of my students was showing them art and architecture from the Renaissance, from the medieval time period. And then I'd show them artwork from the last 100 years. So paintings and some of the pop paintings, architecture, like the brutalist concrete stuff of the Soviet Union to the drab buildings of today. Like, what happened? Like, well, philosophy happened. Ideas have consequences. Is the human person made in the image and likeness of God and worth flourishing then our artwork and making architecture look beautiful for the sake of beauty? Or are we just workers? Are we just cogs in a machine? And if so, then the buildings are going to reflect that. Is life utterly meaningless and void of purpose? Well, then the art is going to mirror that. And you're going to have a banana duct taped to a wall. You're going to have a urinal in a French museum as a legit, quote, legit work of art. And so the art and architecture is in a real way informing us and educating us, just like the law is. There's this symbiotic kind of dance back and forth here of mirroring what we value important and also teaching us what is important. So I talk about in the book reclaiming art and architecture, investing in it. And I mean, church architecture too, over the last 50, 60 years has, I've seen some really ugly churches in my life. And you're like, I don't even know what this building is. Like, I don't even know what stained glass I'm looking at here. But then when you walk in a beautiful church, when you walk in something that is just your eyes go up and it's like, yes, like the soul can rest. And I know what this building is for. And sure, like the church is bigger than just a building. Like you have to look to the people, but the architecture matters. And investing in art proper matters. And there is something to the beautiful when you see a beautiful work of art or piece of music that it just stops you. Because it's like that's what I'm made for. I'm not made for just this kind of drab recycled pop or ugliness. Like a lot of the postmodern stuff is ugly on purpose. Like it's just trying to shock. And when it can't anymore, it's just kind of, again, reflecting the stupidity of life, it would say.
Well,
It's
I
like,
want to talk about what you just said. It's a sin problem because I think this is interesting. I just wrote about that today in my blog. It's about sanctifying ourselves, like all of us. And this is something I think that only Catholicism teaches and puts forth. Our Protestant brothers and sisters don't get this. We don't stand in front of God until we're perfectly sanctified. We work on that now. What we don't finish happens in purgatory. This is reality. And as we get sanctified through grace, through daily prayer, through fasting, which is a process and does not happen in a day, architecture comes along the way, art comes along the way, politics comes along with that. All things go along with that. But is that our driving purpose, even as Catholics? I wonder, do we think like that? Are we constantly working on that sanctifying sin problem, which we all have? We're all sick. Everyone is sick. And if you don't think like that, you're missing it. And if you're not working on that, I got news for you. You may die in a state of grace, but God's going to work on it for you because you're not going in until you're perfect. That's what the church teaches. That's what purgatory is. So, I mean, I'm going to be truthful with you. That's my driving purpose because the holier I get, the more I can do for God, the more God could use me because I'm a clearer drop of water. Talk about that, which I think people are missing in the pews of the church.
Well, there's two Italian examples that come to mind. Two young men who were about to be canonized saints, Pier Giorgio Frassati, who died 100 years ago, and then Carlo Acutis. So Carlo Acutis, who died in 2006, was 15 years old, the first millennial who's about to be canonized a saint by Pope Francis. Took his faith very seriously as a young man, was normal but different, played video games. He knew how to code, created websites, including one devoted to Eucharistic miracles around the world. So using his gifts and talents, but he put God first, and that flowed into the relationships, into the digital work he did. Pier Giorgio Frassati, who was a mountaineer, like a all boy, just pulling pranks with his friends constantly, very athletic, not that great at studying, involved in politics, involved in some of the stuff of his day, but also daily communicant. On like prayed the rosary daily, like both of these young Italian men had God first, had the sanctity piece, like that's where their energy was. And out of that, they had then time for family, athletics, being in the world, and devoting time to these things. So, exactly what you said, it is putting first things first. So, when we think about like solutions and what do I do, it's like, well, it's kind of like the Martha before the Mary. Like, we got to be Mary first. We got to be receptive. We got to realize God is the one he's in control at the end of the day. To go back to Viktor Frankl, it's just the circumstances you have is what you have to work with. So check your attitude. And as disciples, let God do the heavy lifting. You just show up, you be filled before you think the weight of the world is on my shoulders to fix all this stuff. Be holy, daily process of that. And then that's what's going to remain as the culture and the postmodern poison kind of just runs its course. What's going to be left are the saints. What's going to be left are the men and women pointing towards what is true, good, and beautiful, Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Bobby Angel's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. The book, The Postmodern Predicament, and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. So, Bobby, let me go here. You mentioned let's talk about a naughty word, okay, in our postmodern world, okay? Fundamentalism, okay? We're fundamentalists. Now, what do I mean by that? We want to get back to the basics, okay? So, yes, there are fundamental principles that the church teaches that are binding on Roman Catholics, okay? We possess the fullness of the truth, all right? And we want to get back to some ABCs. Now, Joe mentioned how one lives their life will let's say, for argument's sake, but let me put it like this. I don't want to rant. Is loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself is a fundamental. Came out of the mouth of Jesus Christ. If we just did that, would you say that 90% of our problems go away? Okay. The way we treat people, you mentioned art, politics, all the different things that we could pursue in life. The garden is a very big garden. Our freedom is very vast. I like to break it to the atheists out there. I'm free to do many, many, many things. God doesn't have me in chains. Just doesn't ask you to do one thing. Don't try to be God. Love God, serve God, know God, because he loves, knows, and serves you, okay? So that you can live with him forever and love your neighbor as yourself. How about that for just some fundamental? Let's start there. Let's get back to Jesus' own words. Your thoughts?
Yeah, we always tend to overcomplicate things, or we'll say, oh, it's complex, or who could possibly live up to the standard. And again, I hold up Carlo Acutis, for instance, who died in 2006, is someone who can say, like, you can be a saint today. Like, you can love the Lord and love your neighbor in the digital age we live in of distractions and social media and the internet. And so it is this, yeah, the fundamentals, no one bats an eye if you talk about that in the athletic world. Of course, we got to get back to basics. Of course, we got to go back to the drills or music theory even. But when it comes to the moral life, to live in that way, it's like, whoa, hey, don't be crazy. Like, don't be too radical. Like radical means to the root. And if you think about like a radical Christian to live that way, you get a Mother Teresa or you get a Saint Francis. Like to actually live, and that's not everyone is called to do that. But to, we just heard in the gospel recently, like woe to you if you're wealthy now and if you're living in comfort now or you're keeping everyone happy, like you're not making waves. Like your reward is here, and that's where it's going to end. So Jesus was very tender, but he was also not afraid to pull punches because it's our souls at stake. And he wants us to thrive and he wants us to be who we're called to be. And as you said, that's not in trying to imitate God, that's not in trying to take his place. It's by being who we're called to be and realize that he's trustworthy. Because part of that, going back to the garden, it's I don't trust God. A lot of the postmodern angst is just a sense of fatherlessness. I don't trust authority, and I don't trust the highest authority. Therefore, it's all on me, which is crushing, which then we just want to numb out or we want to escape. What if God was trustworthy? What if it's actually, he's a good father? He's not a tyrant. He's not someone who just wants to keep us down with rules and regulations, but he came that we may have life and have it abundantly. That sounds like a much better deal.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to, I mean, one of the postmodern views is, well, okay, but what are we talking about when we talk about life? Like what you mentioned, the telos, the goal of life. It's all perverted in the modern world. I mean, these kids that go to these universities, Bobby, like it was bad enough when Joe and I went to college, okay? And it's 10 times worse now. It's like the philosophy departments are filled with people, and I know because my sister has a PhD in philosophy. They're filled with people that don't even believe in philosophy. It really is amazing. And again, you talk about solutions, and the solution for us obviously is like you said. Let's get back to basics, and let's trust God, but we still have a major fight. And that's why we're glad that people like you are out there, okay, trying to educate people, trying to raise the consciousness of people out there. If you're just joining us here, the way Bobby's doing it, at least this conversation, is the Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration. That's his new book that's available at Sophia Press. Click the link in the description, and it'll take you right to the website. You go buy the book. Let's support our Catholic publishers. Joe Resinello.
I want to talk about swimming against the tide. I went to Catholic school, and I work in the corporate field. I work with many people who went to very good schools, like Catholic schools, people Notre Dame. I'm not picking on them. Georgetown, I work with people who went to Georgetown, Boston College. These are smart people. Um, are we like the rest of the world? And in many cases, Catholics are. See, I grew up, Bobby, near Orthodox Jews, the town right next to me. And where I live, in Bergen County, New Jersey, there are Orthodox Jewish communities. Recently, my wife and I were driving through this one town, Teaneck. It was Saturday, and I was so edified by looking at these families, three generations walking to the synagogue. My wife and I were like amazed. I was like, amazing. They get it. They don't even have Christ. We have Jesus Christ and the sacraments, and we squander it. We squander it. They're not afraid to swim against the tide. They maintain their culture in a culture that's a swamp. And I respect them greatly. I say this constantly to people. They get it, and we should watch what they do. If I was a bishop, I'd have them invited to the conference. Tell me how you do it, because I want to do just what you do, because you get it. You maintained your culture, and we don't. We go right along. We go right along with the tide, and we have to stand out. How do you do that? We have to listen to St. Paul. Put on the armor of Christ. If you think you're going to go out into the world and stand up against the tide of the world at work with your friends in your neighborhood, you are out of your mind.
You're
You're out,
toast.
you're out of your mind. It's like a tidal wave. It will destroy you. Talk about that. First of all, the need to stand, be different, and how to be different. Because if you think you're going to do it on your own strength, wake up. That's not happening.
It's always a tension for Christians in that we don't have a dress code unless you're at a Catholic school. Like we don't have a uniform way of living life. We're very much called to, as laity, called to be in the world. And that can easily lend itself to, I just want to fit in. And I have a good friend of mine who's a professor at a Catholic college, and he's intentionally raised his family in such a way we want to be normal, but different. Like we can have a foot in the culture and in media and sports, but also say no. Like we cannot just bend the knee at certain things. We can't go along just to get along. So there's going to be times where my life has to look different. My language, the movies I watch. And if I'm not really convicted, if I'm kind of embarrassed by Jesus or by my faith, well, then that's going to reflect my larger attitudes. And then, as you said, it's going to be a family tree of we're just kind of here to fit in. We're just kind of going on the treadmill of Catholic education because that's what I did. And then, but if mom or dad's not going to church, especially if dad's not going to church, then the kids, it's like very low chance the kids are going to continue in the faith because if it's not important to dad, then why am I going to do it? So we have to, yeah, check ourselves and say, in a time that so much is against us, when is enough enough? When is it that time? If you ever watch The Chosen, like the intro song, it's like the fish swimming, and eventually one by one, these fish start turning away from just swimming with everyone else. And that's the invitation, and it's exciting, and it's also scary. So, but to who else are you going to go for eternal life? Are you going to go to popularity or your 401k or just the applause of people who don't really care? Or are you going to go to the one who knows you by name? And I want to say too, it's hard to go it alone. And in fact, this is why too, I think when you look at Orthodox Judaism, when you look at Mormonism, even pockets of Muslims, they do a better job of banding together. Whereas Catholics, I think, kind of where we started the conversation in this fiercely American individualistic, it's every man for himself, don't bother me. It's like, yes, but there is something to, you need community. And we need to be able to, against kind of the radical relativism, say, actually, listen, dependency is not bad in and of itself. That the fact that we need one another and we need people to be strong where we're weak and vice versa. So I would challenge that notion too of I got to figure it out on my own, which the internet also lends itself to. I just kind of stay in my own bubble of me and my phone. It's like, no, you need real people. You need real, especially men, like you need community.
I want to just
Now, see, you're
piggyback on
speaking our
that, Joe.
language.
Just one
Go ahead.
sec. Because I think it's so important. Because I want to sell it. Like American families, especially upper middle class families, they want certain things from their kids. I want my kid to be a linebacker. I want my kid to play baseball. I want my kid to get into an Ivy League school. That's what they focus their time on. They do. I mean, I want my kids to achieve things. I'm not going to lie. I have 5 kids like you. This is what's most important. Their Catholic faith. Why, Joe? Why do you think it's important? Because it's the blueprint to a successful life. It's going to guide who they marry, what they do for a living, how they spend their money, how their habits are formed, what they do with their time. Nothing is more important. I have seen people, and I come from very common stock, people who were not educated, who worked hard, who led wonderful lives. I call it the art of living. My father gave me that, and I know what it looks like. And I have witnessed people who had menial jobs live beautiful lives and die with respect and dignity. We don't know what that is because we focus on garbage. So, what I'm selling to you is this: it's the most important thing you can give to your kids. It's going to guide everything that they do to lead to a happy and fulfilled and successful life. It's just a fact. And those who say No, Joe, I disagree with you. I say this on this show all the time, Bobby. How we doing? Look out your window. Look on your street. How are we doing, America? Doesn't look too good to me. Look in your family. Look at your childhood friends. It's a wasteland. We don't know who to marry. We don't know how to manage our marriages. Our kids are nuts. It's what's on television.
Joe,
I'm
let me
going
piggyback.
crazy,
No,
but
no,
it's
no.
clear as day.
You're a lunatic, and we know that. Okay, but let me piggyback from there because we only have a few minutes. Let me piggyback from there and segue into the final question that we have for Bobby. Okay, is this, and it's along those lines. I feel pretty encouraged. Okay, and Joe's right. We agree. Go look out your window. It's a mess, and that's why we're here talking about these things because we're trying to find solutions. But look at some of these kids. Look at some of these kids playing college football. They're all thanking Jesus Christ after the game. After the Notre Dame game against who did they play, Bobby, in the finals? Ohio State. Okay, to both quarterbacks, they're hugging each other, thanking Jesus Christ. The quarterback for Notre Dame was so humble. Where am I going with this? I'm seeing hope out there. I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of hope out there. And people who are unabashedly saying, "Okay, I have some talent. Okay, but I'm giving all the thanks and gratitude to God because He made me. All right, and that's why that motivates me and everything that I do. So where I'm going with this, I'm just going to throw it over you for the last 3 minutes or so. Do you see an awakening, not just in America? No, we're Americans, okay, but we're focused on America. But in the world in general, do you see we're on the precipice of a great awakening?
I think there's always reason to hope as Christians. There's a lot of great philosophy books out there, and I wrote my particular book, which has a really fun cover, by the way. It's a knight in shining armor staring at postmodern artwork. This like kind of very
It looks like
representative.
Jackson Pollock.
Exactly. There's a lot of great philosophy books out there, but they don't always they just kind of end with like, well, and here we are. Well, good luck, everyone. And it's like, how about we have reason to hope? And with Jesus Christ, there always is. It's like the grass and plants that always find a way to break through the concrete sidewalk. Like life will find a way. Jesus Christ will find a way. And out of decay, there will always be the Holy Spirit trying to churn up something new. And whether that it's different missionary activity from countries that were evangelized that now have to go back and evangelize where the faith is dead. I see a lot of where there used to be, and there's always infighting in a sibling way between Catholics and Protestants, but my wife and I have seen just tremendous collaborations happening between Catholics and evangelicals, and sometimes it takes the common enemy to bring warring brothers together. Um, I've seen, yes, as you said, like a generation hungry, because it's not just like, been there, done that with Christianity. I even saw it as a teacher, more and more students that just were raised as nothing, just as none. So they weren't yawning at the good news. It was, I've never heard this before. Like, what do you mean God loves me? And so there will, yes, of course, be the portion of the population's like, I know everything. I went to Catholic school. It's all junk. It's like, well, you haven't encountered Jesus. Like you've been sacramentalized, but you have not encountered the risen Lord yet. And for that, again, everyone's on a different timeline. But I just think there's also a young up and coming generation that believes. And if they don't believe yet, they're hungry for it. They're hungry for life to have meaning. And a lot of the new age stuff and the postmodern thing does not satisfy. It maybe helps. It helps give some coping mechanisms, but it's like we have to be the beggars willing to tell other beggars where the real bread is. Like, hey, we don't need to eat out of the dumpster anymore. Let me show you where the good stuff is.
Yeah, and I think the main way to do that, I make the argument that one of the most, if not the most powerful regime in human history, Nero's regime in Rome, okay, extremely powerful. One thing can think of Stalin having that kind of power at that moment in history. And, Christians didn't stand a chance according to the worldly standards, according to the Dawkinses of the world. Catholic Church shouldn't even be here, should have been gone. Everybody should have just ran away, just like the apostles did. Well, when push came, they all ran away. What did they do? They gave witness to what it is that they believed, and that woke people up. Even the pagan Romans said, "Who are these people?" and wanted to know more about it. And the Greeks, they wanted to know more about it and know more about it. But a lot, okay, preaching, writing books like Bobby Angel's doing, all right. But ultimately, it's our Christian witness, how we live our lives. That is what other people are going to look at and say, I want to get me some of that. All right. Because I tried this stuff All right. And this stuff doesn't seem to work. I want a little bit more of what they got. Bobby, tell our audience again where your website is, you and your wife, and all the places that they could buy the book.
You can go to jackieandbobby.com to find the resources that my wife and I avail. You can go to sophiainstitute.com to get the Postmodern Predicament, or it's also on Amazon. There is an audiobook in the works that's not out just yet, but it was a real honor to write this thing. It's very readable, in my opinion. I wrote it for the non-philosophers out there. So hopefully it's a good 101 explainer how we got here, and then what do we do about it.
You had Joe and Joe in mind as your readers when you were writing the book. And the book, one more time, is The Postmodern Predicament and a Roadmap for Recovery and Restoration, available at Sophia Press. Click the link in the description. You'll get a discount for buying the book. Bobby Angel, you're awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on the front line with Joe and Joe. This was a great conversation. You're welcome back here anytime, brother. We'd love to have you.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all out there for joining us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Download the app, share it with your friends, and wherever you see Joe and I on social media, X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube. We go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern time, where we get into a whole lot of trouble until YouTube and Facebook take us down. Well, maybe not Facebook now, but YouTube. And like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Help us out. Thanks once again. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.